Yeah. Well, thank you. Right, morning everybody, and welcome to Audit and Governance, and thank you for your patience in the slight delay in getting started. Are there any apologies?
We have apologies for Simon Riley and Hassan Riley. Chair.
Thank you. Late items to be introduced by the chair. There are none at this meeting. Any declarations of interest? No, good. Minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of November. Now, I wasn't actually, so accuracy, I will rely on everybody else that was. Any questions to raise for either accuracy or things that aren't covered in this meeting that should be?
We did have a chat about where external audit had not got to, which is actually outside the sort of agenda thing. I don't know where it's not got to at the moment, but I mean, but as I understand it, there is no reason why they can't get on with it because the government's introducing an override for the valuation of assets, so they can get on with the audit. So as I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, we were made aware at the pre-meeting. I think you said, Alison, that they're in at the moment doing the next year's audit. So that's another one that will be awaiting sign off. But nothing else has come to us to be signed off.
Yes. So yeah, they're in doing that. We're expecting that they would cover the previous years off as well because we've applied for the statutory override, so that's all been applied for. So it will be a case of the audit managing their resource to be able to get those two sets of accounts dealt with an override. So they are in at the moment, and we are working with them. So.
Could be worth explaining what override means to let everybody know what it means.
Yeah, well, it's fine. And in terms of the valuation of the, I presume you, sorry, I don't come here all the time. In terms of the infrastructure assets, you must have had long and hard. We know that that's one of the reasons why they couldn't sign off 21-22. Yeah. So it's in terms of the valuations of those. It's the valuations.
Of roads and things like that.
Yeah, and the way that we apply the depreciation on those valuation of those assets, which there's been a contention nationally around how that's done, and CIPFA have committed to doing some work over that, but obviously it hadn't materialised in time for accounts to be signed off, and they've provided the opportunity to, in terms of excluding that new requirement from the audit. With the application of the statutory override, so the audit can continue under the old remit, in essence. So that's hopefully what we will be the audit will be doing. I think there's a QA process to our external auditors will need to go through a QA process to determine the application of that statutory override as well, to make sure that it's all compliant. So, and it's not just a total exclusion. There will be other regulations, but we're confident that there's nothing that will impede our ability to get those accounts signed off, and we've got nothing from the external auditors at this point that gives us that any doubts on that. It's about resource that we've had through the whole recently, and being able to do that. So fingers crossed we won't be running into 3 accounts that are being audited, and we get the others. My team will absolutely be on the floor.
As will we.
I hope so too.
Yes. But they're in at the moment, and we're doing the 21-22.
Anything, Lucy?
I just thought it might be worth the minutes to do an update on 4622 about our independent numbers. To say where we are with that. It obviously went to full council.
I think that's in the outstanding resolution. That's in item 5.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I know we'll be coming on to, or we'll be talking about internal audit, but we did make a request that Resolved to review the process being made by management in respect of the implementation of internal audit recommendations. I just wondered if that's something that's on the SLT discussions that where all the senior officers meet. It's 4722 and it's, yeah, 0.4. So I don't know if it was a resolution for us to review that or whether it was the senior leadership to pick it up and kind of take the bull by the horns themselves, something they directly need to be involved in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Could we have a report on this next time?
Yeah.
Richard, is that something that you can either update committee on or resolve to update committee on?
We'll find somewhere doing that, whether it's myself or whether it's through the responsible officer for internal audit from. I've got to keep some sort of independence.
Absolutely.
All right.
I'll talk with Alison and we'll sort something out, but we'll bring a report to the March meeting.
I think it's really to support you.
It is, which I can do a very good job of supporting myself. That's whether the committee wants an independent view of.
No. It's not about you. I'm talking about the way officers are not responded to. And it was supposed to be your team.
That needs to come from the City Council rather than from myself.
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah.
It'd be nice to have a report from the chief executive actually, because then we cover the whole of the council.
Or maybe we could ask the chief executive to attend the next meeting, because the chief executive used to attend the meetings.
Yeah.
When I was first on audit, the chief exec regularly attended meetings.
Yeah.
It might put a stick up.
It does tend to. John, would you like to invite the chief exec to our next meeting?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Anything else on the minutes? No? Super, thank you. So next item is the outstanding resolutions, item 5. So appointment of independent persons to the Audit and Governance Committee. Do we know if the roles have been advertised yet, Alex? Because it did go through full council, but only last week. And our suggestion was passed. Our recommendation was passed.
Well, I'm not sure whether they've been advertised already, but I'll chase up with Alex and then there will be email to that.
Super,
Just
thank you.
for interest, I spoke to Alex yesterday and he said there is also a vacancy on the remuneration committee and somewhere else. Oh yes, the standards committee, / standards.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
He was going to do an advert in the bottle.
Super,
He didn't have a date time set.
thank you. Should have asked you that. Next one was members of the committee recommended that some sampling should be done to check declared qualifications by candidates. It was agreed that an update on this would be brought to the next meeting. Richard?
Yes, this was a recommendation we had made in the employment checks audit that management had risk accepted. And so as all risk accepted, once we bring it to committee, and committee said, OK, we're happy with what they're saying, but we want to see some sort of sampling and some feedback on that. So I let the section know, I emailed them before Christmas to say what they've agreed they've accepted. They've agreed that you can risk accept it, but they want this proviso that you'll do some sampling. And despite chasing, I've not heard back yet. So I should keep chasing that one. So it'll need to remain on here. Hopefully, I'll have an answer for you by the March meeting.
Super, thank you.
Seems to be quite some checks should be done because I mean,
Yeah.
you're hearing examples around the country of completely disasters. I mean, the worst being obviously the Metropolitan Police issues and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting anything like that would happen here, but you don't know. We don't know because nobody's doing anything. As a minimum, some checks, some sample checks.
Yes, absolutely. Morning. Okay, so the next one was an update on the fixed assets audit. And that's Richard as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this was unfortunately the former head of asset management and estates couldn't attend the meeting to attend a briefing note to say that, in her opinion, they had implemented all the recommendations. Myself and the auditor who did the work have been through the briefing note, and we don't think it fully meets the recommendations that it made. We've also spoken to the relevant head of finance, who also agrees that still issues around this area. So what I've agreed to do is we haven't got the capacity at the moment to do a follow-up audit on it in Q4, but in next year's plan we will follow up. We'll do another fixed asset audit and follow up these recommendations there and report back to committee on whether they have actually been properly implemented or not. Of course, we haven't got the head of asset management to talk to at the moment. She's left the authority.
Okay, thank you. The last one on here then is to invite officers responsible for neighbourhood boards to attend the meeting, and it was Sarah Noss in the car park, and she will be attending later on. So item 6 is contract waivers, which is Linda.
Chair, nice to have an early start.
Isn't it just? I was surprised. I thought I'd got things in the wrong order.
Obviously trying to catch me while I'm still awake. Obviously this report is for a 6-month period, but as the figures are broken down at 4.5 quarterly comparisons, we can see that we're avoidable waivers are the lowest point that have been for a year. Perhaps there's something around the Christmas period. I'm not sure. We'd like to think that that is also as a result of the contract management work that we've done on Life and Smarter. For information, the new procurement and contract management platform went live on January 9th. That means all approvals are now electronic, so nobody can say that they've been held up because they're waiting for somebody to sign something off. We're having a few teething problems, as I'm sure everybody would have expected, because we've newly launched it. But it means that we've got a full audit trail then from the person that applied for the funding right through to who ran the procurement process and the resulting contracts. So you've got a single place of storage, which we've been aiming for a long time. And that will also generate our contract register, which will make that obviously a more accurate document because it's all coming from what activities recorded. It's also recording waivers on the same system, so the waiver form is an electronic form to be signed off, and also the waivers will be added to the contract register because obviously they are a contract, which is something that we know is lacking at the moment. So hopefully more accurate reporting, although we do have it off pat at the moment, I think, reporting this. And so the number of avoidable waivers which are reported, information given at the end, are obviously reduced in number. I couldn't attend the pre-meet myself, but I do know that one of the queries that was on was the very last item, which was dementia support services. That was a cabinet waiver reported for completeness, as I'm sure you're all aware. Went to cabinet on the 12th of October. I have got out the report. The original, this is actually a second waiver. The first waiver we reported on an urgent waiver last year. The original contract was done joint with Derbyshire, but then they went ahead and did their own renewal that we weren't included in. And it's literally down to we've continued a contract that's working well because we're obviously struggling for resource within the department that's got to provide us with the information, but also within procurement at the moment. I'm sure everybody's aware that we're all struggling with recruitment and retention at the moment. So that's the detail. As I say, the cabinet report was the 12th of October, fully approved and minuted. So, and that was reported just for completeness. Happy to take any further questions.
Thank you, Linda. Questions, members? Lucy.
Hi, Linda, I was going to ask you about the one above that, Nightingale House. It seems to me as though we're buying space in Nightingale House, but if we were buying specific beds for specific people, it would have counted as acceptable. Is that the case?
I think the reason for the waiver is because they're doing it outside the remit of the contract. So the contract is set up for and approved to do one thing, and what we're asking them to do is outside of that remit for the contract. So they're invoicing separately because the contract doesn't allow for them to invoice for that particular service, and that's why obviously it is a low amount, but we've classed it as avoidable because if it had been included in the original contract, we would have had to do it. Hindsight's a marvelous thing.
So when we renew,
Yes. Yes. Usually answer to everything.
Any other questions for Linda on the waivers?
No. Can I just make a comment just to support what Linda said about the new process as well, in terms of just the improvements and transparency that will bring in terms of that system is brilliant, and we're waiting for it. We've got a new finance management system, new FMS system that's coming in to play on the 1st of April, and that will even more strengthen that procurement process, because that will hold the contract management that Linda will now be complete through her system, but it will also allow us to match spend against those contracts, which we really struggle to do at the moment. Our ledger system doesn't allow us to match spend incurred against those contracts. So it gives us an extra validation in terms of ensuring that all spend is through the approved contract. So just to give audit, just to give committee really that assurance that we'll be strengthening that even more in April.
Super, thank you. I mean, I'm really pleased to hear little things like the contract register will be automatically updated, because that will save the team another job.
We've actually done a dummy transparency report, and the officer that's done it for me, bless him, came back and said 1 million easy. So that's
high praise.
That's what he came back and said, because it's literally a download, so much easier.
No, that is good. I mean, the thing that I was concerned at the pre-meet, and we mentioned at the pre-meet, that went across the council. I mean, it's obviously something I would ask you given what you've said, but in terms of recruitment and retention in your team, sorry, computer's trying to restart. Clearly that's a concern across the council. How? Okay.
Across the East Midlands at the moment. I actually attended a meeting last night, and a lot of councils are paying interim procurement officers £600 a day to fill a seat. Now, we haven't gone down that route. We could probably get shot if I asked if we could actually, but we haven't gone down that route because I don't think it's fair on normal team members either. But yes, we have struggled. We're currently at 50%. But our restructure is part of the MTFP, so obviously our recruitment's delayed until the consultation and everything's finished and that's signed off. Worryingly, Nottingham are looking to, I quote, expand and improve their procurement service, so we could have difficulties competing, which is what we found in the past. But the new structure includes an additional layer, an interim layer, so that we can grow our own, so that we can encourage people to go on the apprenticeship levy if we can find the courses to put them on through that levy, and hopefully retain staff that way because they can improve within their role. And of course, working at home has made it easier for everyone to work for different places.
Yeah,
which is what I mean. Yes, I'm sat alone upstairs today, but I mean we do allow them to work at home. We're obviously very flexible, and hope we can attract people because of the conditions rather than just based on salary. Yes.
But then the apprenticeship thing could cause issues if you've got people who want to work from home who would benefit from being supported by other staff, and if you haven't got the staff to support. I mean, I know there've been, there've not been great retention rates with apprentices in procurement in your team for over the last few years when that's happened.
It's just got ourselves Bill, very keen, very able.
You clearly did a fantastic job training people.
Yeah.
Stop that. I mean, I don't know what we can do as a committee to do anything for recruitment and retention when the situation is quite so tricky across the region. And yeah, I know it is. But also with the other cuts coming to the council and job losses coming to the council, I don't know what we can offer in terms of support or anything, which frustrates me.
I think what we've got to do is wait and see what response we get to our advertisements when we get to go out with them.
Yeah.
Which is probably obviously going to be in March. I would have thought realistically.
Okay.
So go out for recruitment and see how we get on. What we don't know, of course, is what, not in any detail, what changes within departments are happening. So actually what support for processes will be from the people that are supposed to know what they want. So there's going to be a big learning curve there, I think, in the future going forward.
Okay. I mean, if there is anything that you think the committee can do, then please get in touch and we will, try and support as always.
With challenge to recruitment, is it skilled people availability or what or not enough people out there to apply, or?
I think it's a bit of both. Definitely not a lot of people nowadays doing procurement qualifications. I still don't think it's one of those sort of, oh gosh, you're a buyer type of roles. Yeah, I still don't think it has that sort of stature. But I think we do. The standard for the council is, educated to A-level standards, and the starting level is actually a very reasonable income, but people that are earning that sort of money want to improve themselves rather than start at the bottom again in procurement. And I think that's what the difficulty is. There's nothing really simple. We don't utilise business support, for example, because our support are specialist officers that are, contributing to processes and know what the regulations are that govern the part of the process that they're looking at. So it's really quite difficult to move someone round without actually spending quite some time, sitting with them.
And is that something peculiar to us, that the recruitment level that's paid so that people can't move on?
There's a lot of re-evaluating grades of officers so that councils can attract the people that are available. Obviously, when you've got budget constraints, it's very difficult to do that. I'm sure you've seen in the MTFP that what I've done is taken out the category management role, which was strategic, and made the role that fed into that a grade higher, so that we can try and attract experienced procurement people at a slightly higher grade. Of course, we lose the strategic level of the role, but to be honest, with particularly difficult decisions to make, but we've upgraded that level, and we've introduced the additional middle level so that we can try and attract people, at differing levels of experience. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think would there be a general comment about uncertainty and then not enough funds, so you can't recruit, sort of one boxing, can't recruit at the right level.
Yeah, I mean, it's
And
an
then there's
issue. Yeah,
pressures.
it's an issue across the whole organisation in lots of, well, not just professional fields, in care services as well. I mean, it is on the strategic risk register in terms of recruitment and retention. So it is it's acknowledged by the organisation that we do need mitigations in that area to be able to help the organisation going forward in terms of maintaining its workforce. But yeah, it isn't specific to procurement. It's an issue across the region.
So is there a role for this committee, audit and governance, in terms of looking at that? It's just a strategic thing we're talking about, as far as linked to a central funding issue in terms of local government. So you're sort of reducing our capacity, our funds to actually deliver the services. Is that something that we should be looking at? Is it within our own remit?
I just think it is there on the risk register. Maybe we should pick it up under that and talk about it then.
Yeah.
Because it is like a broader issue than just procurement.
Strategic risk.
Sarah, do you want to come in now?
It's just worth flagging at the moment. We obviously are preparing the Q3 position from a risk perspective, and that has been identified as an area for further consideration. Obviously, the report that is presented to this committee at this point represents the Q2 risk register. We have already flagged that, given where we are, and it's an area that's going to be reviewed and redefined over the next couple of weeks, including the score and the wider mitigations, reflecting what's happening within services as well. So that has already been picked up.
I think if we carry this bit of the debate on as a later item where it's a little bit more, and send Linda back to do some work because there's not enough people in the team to do it.
Insurance is my job to do.
Enjoy. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Really appreciate it. So item 7 is the whistleblowing policy, and Paul has come to talk to us about it.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. This is a revision of the existing whistleblowing policy. It looks quite different, but the content isn't all that changed. What I did was I had a look at an industry standard policy on the basis that it would be up to date. And rather than trying to put all of the content of that into our existing policy, I took what we needed from our existing policy, put it into this industry standard. The point of the policy, as you'll be aware, is to walk a balancing line between encouraging people to come forward with genuine concerns about things that are going wrong in the organisation, and to deter mischievous complaints or concerns that aren't really whistleblowing, aren't really public interest disclosures, but more about working conditions, which and I think this does that as well as we need it to. Hopefully you'll agree. I think it helps to clarify the process. Looking at the previous version, it wasn't entirely clear to me that the process of raising a whistleblowing complaint is initially through your line manager, or if your line manager is part of your concern, then his or her line manager, before going to the monitoring officer who ultimately deals with complaints if they can't be dealt with at that sort of departmental level. I've also included a reference to a whistleblowing charity called Protect, which is a useful place. I suppose the rationale behind that is that a whistleblower, by their nature, may have concerns about raising what they think is a breach or an illegal act, possibly within the workplace where they think it's happening, where they believe it's happening. From our point of view, we would rather they raised it with us than go, say, to the press or media. So having reference to the charity Protect at the end there, and the body of the policy, gives someone an alternative route if they want to discuss the issue in confidentiality before raising it formally. Now, the policy's been through the policy working group, and with a couple of changes which are tracked in this, it's been approved by them. And hopefully you'll feel the same way about it. If you have any questions, I'll do what I can.
Thanks, Paul. Any questions, members? Lucy?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's written very crisply. I think you'll get through sort of plain English for us. But I was slightly concerned about the stylist way of saying that we will do something, because it's just flagged up particularly to me at 5.3, where having described that you need to talk to your line manager and monitoring officer, we will arrange a meeting with you as soon as possible. It's, you know, we had been corporate Derby City Council, but we is now, well, I'm not sure who it is. And it seems unclear as to whether that is your line manager or the monitoring officer itself or somebody else in some other group. And I just felt that it lost clarity because of that stylist explanation. And I still don't know who's actually going to arrange the meeting or who it's going to be with. It's because we will take down a written summary of your concerns. So we will arrange a meeting, we will take down a written summary, but we don't know who's doing it. So I just thought a little bit more clarity on that would be helpful. And two other points at the end, in terms of the contacts, the phone number given with 01332 at the beginning of it. But in the head of safeguarding, adult safeguarding, cohesion and integration manager, paragraphs 11 and 12, you've again got contact details, but without the 01332, which I think is just tidying up. But in terms of the chair of the audit committee, given that this is a document that's designed to last for people viewed every 3 years, that needs to be a generic how to find it on the website rather than a particular person. Because you might be here.
I won't.
In a year time.
I won't be here.
Not standing again.
No.
Oh, well, it will be out of date then. Oh, it's gone very long. So, sure.
Just on that, Paul, and your idea of this we, it does make it kind of you and against us, or, you know, kind of the organisation itself is something that will respond to you. I think maybe if you used a passive construction on that, just said a meeting will be arranged with you as soon as possible.
Still doesn't
And then
say
there's
who
no,
it's with.
pardon?
It still doesn't say who it's with.
No, and then and a further rider could be put with an appropriate officer or an appropriate senior member of
The
the.
manager or the monitoring officer will arrange for a meeting.
Yeah, yeah.
It might even be helpful to have in the very first paragraph at 1.1, where it just says we are committed to conducting our business, etc., who that we is, so that it then follows on the we, because Lucy raises a very good point that it could be anybody. And if you're wanting to raise a concern, you don't know who the we is, you might then helpfully go to the other numbers that you've put in there, but you might not raise the concern in the first place. I mean, I like it, and I like that it's been a complete rewrite. And as I said at the pre-meet, I hope it will make people actually want to read it. Sorry, Hardil.
Yeah, just funny. I think most procedures have who the person go to, you know, in terms of complaints, or and then what who will do what. Obviously, if it's any level of organisation, you need any person at any level needs to have a way of saying where they go. And I don't know if that's captured in this document.
I think the addition, the changing, potential changing of the word we to an appropriate manager or an appropriate.
Usually
that would cover that, wouldn't it?
Well, that's still generic, isn't it? It's not really giving a structure for people to where they go to.
5.1, I think, covers that.
Sorry?
5.1, I think, in many cases, you'll be able to raise any concerns with your line manager or the HR department. Don't know why HR department.
That was the intention of
It could be-
5.1.
It could be your line manager.
Could be.
So it's
But you
not,
may tell them, but if you prefer, you can go to somebody else.
it's
If you feel that
just,
your line manager or the HR department has not addressed your concerns, or you prefer not to raise it with them, you should contact the monitoring officer.
You could raise it directly with the officer yourself. That.
No, it gives you choice, doesn't it? It's
Yeah,
not going to criticise you on it.
I suppose it's a question of the nature of the complaint and the appropriateness of who should deal with that. If it's something internal to the department, maybe not. Line manager would be wise, because that's a big pressure on them if they're kind of line manager to go along and raise a concern as a whistleblower. So I do think that maybe a prefaced box at the top with some kind of guidance or steer towards, and also letting line managers know how they should deal with something. So if somebody comes on and says, I'm a whistleblower, I want to raise this concern, they should know it immediately, that they should be saying, I want to direct you to this person, or I will talk to someone about this before you go any further with the discussion. It's a bit like disclosure, isn't it?
That's an important training issue.
Yeah, yeah.
just remembering what happens in the police, the whole department, professional standards department, where their job is to investigate and identify proactively and reactively people doing wrong, not undertaking their duties or sort of using the system. So there's somewhere who's proactively looking at unprofessional wrong behavior in an organisation. We don't have anything like that. And it might be worth looking to see how police, they've had to do it for a long time, the role is a very powerful role for any one individual police constable as an independence. So maybe something that you could look at for future.
Doesn't that one easier?
Presumably,
I don't
one
know.
of the roles of HR, isn't it?
Well, Chair,
Yes, it
actually,
doesn't-
it's the role of the monitoring
Appoint
officer.
your manager, we will do that.
Sorry,
So-
members, the officer is trying to respond.
That is the role of the monitoring officer, council. The monitoring officer is a statutory employee who has a specific role to oversee the functioning of the organisation from an external point of view, in fact, sort of internal cop, as it were, and the process of raising a whistleblowing concern. And it's not entirely straightforward. The law in this area has developed in unexpected ways, to the extent that about 10 years ago, I think the high point in terms of claimants was that a complaint about a breach of one's own contract of employment was deemed to be a public interest disclosure, which is not something I think that was intended by Parliament when the legislation was first drafted. It came out of cover-ups of wide-scale wrongdoing in organisations. And since then, the courts have reined back the development of the case law, so that it's not quite as susceptible to that sort of abuse. There are other channels for complaints about breaches of your own contract and being a process. Clause 5 is, because of the lack of clarity around that, designed to steer a whistleblower, potential whistleblower, initially towards their manager. But as clause 5.1 says, if the manager can't find a way of resolving the process, or frankly isn't sure about how to deal with it, they can go to the monitoring officer, who is the repository of that knowledge process of dealing with a complaint, which is in fact a public interest disclosure. And clause 5.2 says that where the matter is more serious, or you feel that your line manager or HR can't or won't address or haven't addressed your concern, you can go directly to the monitoring officer, whoever that may be from time to time. I don't know whether that helps.
Yes.
Everybody happy with that response? So in terms of us approving this policy, would we be happy to approve this policy if there is some clarification who we is in the document, and if the phone numbers are standardised in the document to include the area code, as Councillor Kerr has requested, and that there is a link to find who the monitoring officer and the chair of audit and governance are?
Just one other minor thing, the email for Ernst Young has got a gap in it. I don't know if there's a mistake there.
Yeah, I mean, the
And
external.
the reference to the phone numbers in 6.2, so
Yeah.
it's paragraph 5. But that link just needs to be tidied up. Because quite clearly,
External auditors also.
it's not going to be
Yes.
Ernst and Young forever, is it?
No, not for long at all. So no, that was the other thing I was going to say, external auditors.
That needs changed. That needs, is that somewhere on the website kept up to date?
I think the external auditors are listed somewhere on the website.
We don't have a link to someone as well.
But it will need to be if we want to put a link in here to keep this as an updated document without having to go through an update if someone leaves or when external auditors change. But with those amendments, are we happy to approve this policy? Yeah? Yes.
Sure.
No problem, thank you. Item 8, where's it gone? Item 8 is risk management assurance update. Over to Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the committee's 6-monthly update with regards to risk management. It does provide a little bit more detail than colleagues considered in the July update. So just to draw attention to some of the developments we've made in relation to risk management over the last 6 months, and then I will just set out a couple of highlights from the appendices and questions. So if I can draw attention to paragraph 4.4, we have made and continue to make developments with regards to our risk management framework. So over the last 6 months, we have developed guidance on risk escalation and de-escalation to strengthen risk identification and analysis, recognising that this was an area that could be developed and was reflected as such in our self-assessment of the implementation of the handbook. We've strengthened the oversight within our risk registers, ensuring that there is sign-off for all strategic and directorate risks by risk owners. And we have done quite a bit of work around our draft risk appetite statements. So we hosted a number of workshops last year, and those statements are actually being, or have just been updated for consideration by colleagues linked to proposals in relation to the medium-term financial plan, and they will be included within the updated handbook and strategy, which I'll come on to talk about shortly. We've done work in terms of strengthening the risk templates and alignments between templates that exist in bespoke areas. So whether that's in certain projects or in relation to, for example, our housing revenue account risk registers. We've done a lot of risk oversight and assurance activities, and there are details of those presented within paragraph 4.12 of the report. So we continue to be very active within this area, aided by the Corporate Risk Management Group. Following on from feedback from the committee and some of the questions around some of our significant strategic risks at the last meeting, we've also introduced 6 monthly assurance reviews on any risks where the risk scores have not changed. This is both in addition to medium, low, significant risks, and that is directorate and strategic, just to provide assurance around the adequacy of the mitigations and understand the context for the risk and what's driving the current level of threat, and how we can work to further mitigate that as appropriate. And there has been work to draft an initial self-assessment in relation to our risk maturity. And again, there are details of this contained within the report under paragraph 4.16 and 4.17. It's worth noting that many of the developments that we continue to make are addressing the recommendations of the internal audit that was published last year. There has been a slight delay in the publication or presenting for consideration our updated risk management strategy and handbook, and that has been a request to the chair, which was approved, to ensure that we can align the content of those documents with the direction of travel with our medium-term financial plan, particularly in relation to risk appetite statements. We've seen a number of areas develop as a result of the activity that we've undertaken over the last, not just 6 months, it's been the last couple of years, and you will see some of the traffic lights have improved within Appendix 1 in relation to some of the self-assessment grades for our risk management strategy and handbook, most notably risk opportunity and identification, and also risk appetite and risk maturity, as we are continuing to do work within this space. We do have a workshop scheduled for next week to engage a variety of colleagues from across different services, including projects, some of our risk champions, to review where we are with the updating of the strategy and handbook and ensure that we are addressing all of the recommendations, but engaging and ensuring that it's a document that's fit for purpose and starts to shape and develop our risk culture and our overall risk maturity. Obviously presented within Appendix 2, they were all of the strategic risks that were present as at the end of September, which I'd mentioned previously. We're just in the process of going through the reporting cycle for Q3 with Cabinet at present, and there is a full overview of in relation to each of those strategic risks, the activity that's happened in relation to the mitigations, how those risks are overseen, and also whether there has been any deep dive activity. I'm happy to take any questions from colleagues. I will just end on the reflection that in relation to our risk maturity, I used a number of different models for this that have been identified through organisations that provide training and support in relation to risk, to ensure that we got a holistic overview of where our risk maturity currently is. And overall, the initial self-assessment is that we're proactive, engaged, moving towards optimised and embedded. Now, to move that forward, I think there's opportunities for us to continue to strengthen our risk framework at service and departmental level. Application of risk appetite statements is really key, and using them to shape our decision making. And there's an opportunity to do a little bit more work around the partnership workspace, which we've moved forward with, obviously, and there'll be an update to the committee, I think, in March on partnerships. And now we've had an update on the Derby plan. We'll be progressing that forward from a risk-based and opportunity perspective. I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Paul?
I suppose in the present climate, has there been a shift in the overall risk tolerance in terms of how we approach risk? Have we become more tolerant to risk or less tolerant to risk, or does it depend on departments or the risk itself?
Within the guidance, the updated guidance, there's going to be some really clear distinctions between our risk appetite and our risk tolerance. So within the risk appetite document, which is obviously where we're seeking to take risk, particularly when we look at proposals as part of the medium-term financial plan, I think there's an overall acceptance that we are moving in a direction of having to accept and take more risk. From a tolerance perspective, we do that on a risk by risk basis. and look at it very closely with regards to the mitigations that are in place, the adequacy of the mitigations and our overall risk appetite. I think there's more work we need to do within the space once we've published that guidance for colleagues. But overall, I think we've got to recognise that we are accepting a higher level of risk.
Yeah.
But we've got to do that in an insight and an informed basis. And we've really done a lot to strengthen the risk identification analysis. So through the areas where we've undertaken risk assurance activities, we've gone into a lot of depth through risk bow ties, through aligning risks together, looking outside of our own risk framework to what's happening. So we've got a cost of living risk register, which really draws from national and local activity to start to shape our understanding of what our risk appetite is and what our overall tolerance is, given the exposure that is currently in place for many organisations. But I do think it's a really fair question. But the risk appetite obviously is set by the organisation.
Yeah, and I think it's a good reflection of the fact that we do have a cost of living risk register,
We do.
which we hope will diminish in importance as time goes on, but it's really important at the moment because it's obviously a key pillar of the council plan for resilience, isn't it?
It is, and actually, just to reflect in relation to the cost of living, we have a strategy and action plan, and from a risk register perspective, we have a risk register for cross-cutting partnership citywide risks. There is one for council risks, reflecting the risks to our own colleagues and us as an organisation from the cost of living, and there is also a project risk register, which is really ensuring that we've got that we are identifying the opportunities and threats to delivery of the action plan and the strategy. So we've got a robust programme of activity in place there.
Just as a final thing on this, because there is a cost of living, we do get money from the government in tranches over the years, household support. And the government is giving the money at the same rate every time. So, for example, last May in 22, they gave a certain tranche of money. And then the same tranche of money to the penny was given in October 22. No allowance for inflation. And that's going on to April or May 23 and October 24, all based on the same amount of money, which is increasingly of less value. And prices are going up at 17% for food. So that's a big risk. And I think that needs to be reflected on the cost of living.
Absolutely, I'll make sure that's reflected. I think the other thing to reflect is that by working in partnership with colleagues such as Community Action Derby and other organisations, we are working as effectively as we can to mitigate those risks and creatively distribute it, working with communities as well to maximise and create sustainable solutions as well, not just putting in place things that are short term. But I'll take that away and I'll make sure it's reflected. Thanks.
This sort of thing the Poverty Commission have been involved in.
Absolutely. Thank you. Mike.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In the table at the end, there are two risks that are red. The first one, I can understand why it would remain red forever, because that's cybercrime. That's a moving target. But the other one that said ineffective contract management, I'm expecting to see that come down as we get, like I used to do risk management, and clearly having a red risk on a nuclear reactor is something we couldn't. This is slightly different.
So this position is as is reported at the end of September. You will see that change as part of the quarter 3 report. So obviously based on the update that colleagues have already had this morning in relation to contract management and the implementation of the procurement platform and all of the work that Linda was talking about, that has already been reduced within the quarter 3 report. So that's
to Amber or to
So it's, I think it's memory score. If memory serves me right, I think it's coming down to it's 9 at present. So an amber risk.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Ardil.
The red risk on SR16, CR17 about revenue, insufficient resource to meet planned expenditure. That's part of revenue, having enough people to deliver. Is that what we're talking about there? I mean, or is there something that isn't captured here about capital and revenue completely, you could get capital funding. Implement or use.
Yeah.
So we lose, is that captured?
So
Yes, or is there someone else?
the revenue, the SR16, CR17 is about your in-year revenue budget. So in terms of capital, that will be reflected as part of the MTFP and also within, I believe, yes, SR22, CR24 capacity, and also the programme and project management risk. Because from a gateway perspective, obviously we are looking, we as colleagues may remember, we bought the updated gateway guidance, and that included things such as opportunities from external bids. So there are a number of different areas where it features within the risks. And this is exactly a really good example of where we do a lot of work to ensure that things are appropriately reflected in the right area, to ensure that the mitigations are effective in the specific area of threat. So that is reflected, but the revenue one is specifically with regards to our renewal spend. I don't know if Alison wants to add anything else.
No, I think that explains.
Can you explain, so in-year revenue challenges, what can that be then? For example?
So that's the budget that's any budget pressures that.
Yeah, so any overspends that we have in the year or any increases in demand that we've not budgeted for that could materialise in overspends. That would be that.
I think it's probably worth reflecting that some of the risks, and again, this is something we're going to pick up as part of the refreshed handbook and strategy. It's a very fine balance between we recognise some of these are issues and also future threats as well. So it is about considering it within that context, because obviously we know that some of these, and that's a really good example of that risk, is an issue at present, but it continues to be a future risk as well.
Some of those are always there, aren't they? Social care, for example, social services, they've never disappeared.
They never disappear, and it's a multitude of issues as to why they become a risk. It could be around demand for services, but it also could be about market failure, which is a big risk at the moment in terms of our social care space, particularly with cost of providing services from our contracts. There's a whole raft of issues that have to be mitigated through the year. So it's not just around having enough money in the budget, it's about managing all those different influences that can cause those costs to escalate.
It's always been difficult to understand those risks that never disappear.
Yeah. And that they are reflected, and you will see, I think one of the things we have strengthened is the extent to which we're challenging them. So you will see more variation in the scores, where we're looking at, possible impact of mitigations and aligning it. So I think memory serves me right that we reduced the risk around our ability to meet statutory needs due to demand in children's, recognising the outcome of the Ofsted inspection, application of thresholds. So we continue to review and challenge, but they are likely to remain significant risks for the organisation and the city.
Lucy, and then Philip. Thank you. I also want to pick up on the SR22-24, CR24, which you've just mentioned, but not so much in terms of the teams to deliver services, but the reducing capacity of more senior management and strategically to be able to do strategic thinking and the creative capacity to be able to do problem solving and innovations and that side of thing, which doesn't seem to be reflected here, but which I feel is going to be an important challenge.
Yeah, so again, supporting in effective risk identification, we introduced an emerging risk log a number of years ago, which is overseen through our corporate risk management group and is accessible to directors at any point. And we also flagged that counsellor care, so that is something that we are defining at present in line with the NCFP processes and looking at the broader risks associated with that from an organisational perspective. So to provide that assurance, we have identified it. It is something we are proactively working on, and it will be reflected as those definitions are defined, obviously following consultation and implementation. And there will also be a greater presence within the strategic risk register, as I've mentioned, around the recruitment retention. We are specifically doing some work to look at those risks.
So is this something that will also go to the?
Yes. And again, there'll be more guidance on the emerging risk log and issues logs that we've got in place in the updated handbook as well, just to provide that full overview of the strategic risk register is one view into the risk framework that we've worked to develop over the last few years. And there are lots of different tools that we're using to ensure that it's effective and reflective of where we currently are.
Is the risk management handbook on iDerby?
It is.
Okay. Need to search.
It's very easy to find, really easy to find. I will send you a link, but it is the previous one rather than we are working on updating it at present. So it is the one that the committee had previously seen, but I'm happy to share the link.
Okay, thank you. Sarah. Philip.
Just I was intrigued with the very last one, the opportunity end. Are there any? I wonder if there are any other opportunities that are, as well as risks? Because it's interesting balance.
It's a fine balance. So what with all of our risks on the strategic and directorate risk registers and within the project risks, we will seek to encourage our colleagues to think of both threats and opportunities. I think as part of our maturing culture, the challenge is still to think about risk from an opportunity perspective, but we are seeing increasing numbers of opportunities present within the risks. And in some instances, when we're asking risk owners and colleagues to assess how they're going to progress forward with the treatment of the risk, they may say, actually, I'm going to treat the risk, but I'm going to seek to exploit the opportunities that exist alongside it. So we are increasingly presenting more challenge, but it is, I think, the comfortable space and the familiar space from a risk perspective is looking for on the threats. But
absolutely, but if you can turn it to a positive sometimes, I'm not suggesting we go to like I have in Bhutan, a national happiness index, but I mean that's an objection you could have.
Next year,
it's just to get a different twist on it.
That is something we are constantly working with colleagues to do. So when a risk is identified within our risk registers, we will ask the risk owner to think about the worst case, but also the best case. And within thinking about that best case, it's really starting to draw out the opportunities that may exist within the risk. So that is something that we're continued to embed and strengthen, but it's been in place for a number of years, and we have seen more opportunity risks. But I think the landscape at the minute does make that challenging.
I can see why it's difficult to turn people's minds out. It's a mindset people got mindset of risks. But if that mindset can be not changed, but be aware of the risks, but we also be aware of the opportunities.
Yeah,
people have a more positive attitude.
Yeah. And I think that's helped to shape some of the mitigations and controls we have in place when colleagues are thinking about, from a risk perspective, what could be the best case from this? What are the opportunities that may fall out of what could be quite significant threats? And that they are always identifiable, and we are working to ensure we maximise those.
I'm not suggesting go to our suggestion box, but it's sort of anything that come up. The other area I was just interested in, the risk subject to review in the last 12 months. So you set out where it has happened. Are there any other areas where you feel that there is any review would be helpful? You want some sort of clarity about what other people think of what you've done? Is there anywhere else that, I don't know, we could liaise internal audits work could link in more with that? Anything along those lines? Any way that could be improved to ensure that we've got a bang up to date and continuing bang up to date information on risks?
Yeah. So in relation to risk, obviously the internal audit programme is already aligned to our strategic and directorate risks. We engage a lot with colleagues. So from a assurance perspective on our programmes and projects, Martin is part of a group, a professional officers group that seeks assurances from a gateway perspective. We will look at all opportunities we can to strengthen what we do through that assurance activity. So Richard is part of the corporate risk management group in terms of ensuring that we're feeding that through from both a risk perspective, but also an audit perspective. There's always room for improvement. That's my background. From a risk perspective at this present time, is there anything that stands out that we haven't reviewed? We've done a lot over the last 2 years, and I would be very confident in saying we've probably looked at pretty much every risk from a assurance perspective on the strategic risk register, alongside the work of internal audit colleagues. So we're probably at the point we're needing to revisit a lot of that, and actually the introduction of the 6 monthly assurance conversations and reviews on risks where the scores haven't changed just provides a different lens into that conversation as well. There are areas where I think I'd like to do more work around the service and departmental level, because what that will start to do is identify how effective we are at that escalation and de-escalation of risk and opportunity, and may give us a different view into areas that we've not identified. But overall, I think from an assurance perspective, we've done a lot of activity within this space.
I mean, that was the impression I got, that, you know, a lot was done there. Sorry.
I think we spoke about other ways officers in terms of the risks identified as part of the MTFP proposals. They have been identified by officers, but it's about joining that piece of work up with actually the risk register as well. So that is something that we are doing as well.
Yeah, thank you much.
Just on SR30/PS24, which is summarised by local area SEND services and provision are not effective. You know that the family coming in should be £3 million coming into the city, and I think that will be really helpful, because we often meet children in the city who need assessing when they go to reception, and that's far too late. Whereas it will be picked up from birth.
Absolutely.
Through. So I mean that reduces the risk if it's kind of a multi-professional approach and people are referred. Obviously, parents want to say no to it. That's how that's handled is important. But I think that's a really important.
Make sure it's reflected, and I think that's where that balance of the opportunity that presents can start to actually balance the threat as well. So that's another really good example.
Yeah, and it's a big opportunity.
It is absolutely a massive opportunity.
Yeah.
Lucy? And there's another one that potentially is opportunity may already be happening, SR8CR7, in terms of data record data quality. That was flagged up for our minutes last meeting about the national fraud initiatives highlighting our data. Is that sort of thing routinely picked up on, and the learning from one particular point spread across other areas of the authority? Or is that something that we need to system in place that's not there yet?
I'm not on the information governance working group. I don't know if any of our internal audit colleagues are and can respond to that, but from a assurance perspective, we seek to ensure that the learning is taken forward. Richard?
We don't sit on the information governance, but we're the ones that do the NFI, and we raise the issue around the data quality, and it is getting it out there, and that's the big problem at the moment, is getting everyone to realise there's so many systems out there that are should we say the data that's held in it could be vastly improved. We find it every time when we do the NFI submissions that if we don't get it right, back it comes from an NFI saying these fields are wrong, these fields are wrong. So we do a trawl. It takes a lot of time, but what we could do with is the departments actually looking at their systems and making sure that the information held in there is accurate and meets the requirements of the fields.
So that sounds as though there's a piece of work there that we ought to be liaising on more closely.
We are planning to do more audit work around this, so we'll be picking up on those as well. So it'll be coming back to this committee on a regular basis, I would think.
I think the thing is with that, not just one audit to do, but it's all authority-wide. It's not to do an audit in each one of the areas where the submission and stuff done. So it needs to be sort of built into existing audits of particular areas rather than one specific. Otherwise, it would be too immense to do.
Well, we need to look at an underlying principle that when you are putting in a postcode, it's got to have the right format everywhere, whichever system it's going to, it needs to be right. So.
Well, it's these dozen, well, several dozen systems.
Oh, yes,
Obviously.
but each department needs to get the message.
You'd hope that the systems will actually flag that up. You know, this is not an accurate postcode. This is not been entered as a proper postcode.
It's not rocket science,
No.
is it? It's good programming, but sometimes people need to be reminded to do good programming.
Anything else from members? No. So I just wanted to pass on our thanks as a committee. I did this, or we did this at the pre-meet, but just to reiterate, Sarah, and to your team, thank you for the work that you do to make these reports better for us as a committee based on the comments that we make to you regularly. I do feel that the reports that you present to us are very clear and probably easier to read each time based on the comments that we make as a committee. But just to pass on the thanks to you and your team for that.
Yeah.
And for that to be minuted instead of just on a pre-meet call.
Thank you.
So item 9 is Programme Management Office update, which is you again.
It's me again. So I am pleased to share an update on the progress that we've made with the Programme Management Office over the last over a year. It actually doesn't feel that long. I thought it was only last year that I brought the update, but it was September 2021. So obviously at that point, we identified a lot of developments that were in place in terms of was strengthening our programme and project environment from an assurance perspective, following the transition of that service. So set out in paragraph 4.4 are some of the key developments that we've made over the last just over a year to 18 months, that closes the loop on the areas that were previously presented to the committee that we were going to progress. So we have implemented the project management platform, and I'll come on to talk about that a little bit more shortly. We are still waiting for the summary dashboards from our digital colleagues who are working to progress this, but we have worked extensively with programme and project leads to ensure that implementation has been as smooth as possible and the system is delivering what it had originally intended to do, which is providing that full repository of all of our programme and project materials, and that is actually enabling us just to undertake more targeted risk-based reviews of those documents from a project and a programme perspective in readiness for gateway discussions. We do have a project manager network in place now, and that meets regularly, and identified within the report are some of the areas that have been considered through that group. And I'm really pleased to say that as that group's developing, we're getting more people coming to talk at the group rather than myself or colleagues with, I say myself, it's probably my assurance lead in fairness, presenting to the group. It's really taking that expertise that exists across the organisation and sharing that, and specifically sharing the lessons where we may have got to a particular stage in delivery with other colleagues, so that we can try and ensure that we are maximising the benefit of that learning. We have had some targeted project and programme management training for key project personnel that was delivered in 2022, and we've obviously through the project manager group focused on key areas of need. But one of the things I'm keen to do is develop a more formalised training programme going forward. There is work in place linked to the medium-term financial plan proposals around the establishment of a project management hub, bringing together project colleagues with our transformation colleagues to ensure that consistent and effective delivery from a support perspective. And whilst we've not implemented the portfolio and programme management approach through our governance structures, what we have done is invested that time into our partnership board and the city plan, and there will be a new transformation board set up in early 2023 from a council perspective. So within paragraph 4.5, just to give committee members a bit of a flavour of the kind of things that are developing through the gateways, you will see some of the things that have been considered. really pleasing from my perspective is that we are strengthening our project pipeline, so we know what's on the horizon, and if things need to change in terms of date, we've got a really good grip of understanding why those delays might be and ensuring that they come for consideration and review at the most appropriate time. And as you see, there's a lot of different varying gateways, which is just showing that we are moving forward with delivery in a lot of areas. I did mention under the risk management item, we have also introduced, so we have the Programme Management Office Board, which is chaired by Simon and has representatives from all directorates and professionals within that group. So Alison is a member of that board. But to ensure that we're strengthening what's happening outside of the board, over the last 6 months, we've introduced an assurance and development group, which is bringing together professionals from some of our specialist services, so procurement, our digital colleagues, audit is part of that. We've got some of our key project and programme managers and experts so that we can ensure that we've got that effective horizon scanning, strengthening the pipeline, but also providing that support and guidance to projects as they're moving through the gateway process, so that before they get to that gateway decision, there's been that challenge in place, and it ensures overall this is all intended to increase the successful delivery of our programmes and projects. So obviously I'd mentioned the project management platform, and in 4.9 there's a little bit of a graphic there that gives you an overview. We've got 110 programme and project sites contained on the platform. This covers a wide variety of activity. Not all of those meet the gateway criteria, but there's been really positive engagement, and we've got some really good examples through working with our housing colleagues, for example, of strengthening the overall governance that exists and using the platform as a catalyst to do that. As I reflected on the previous report, from an assurance perspective, we are looking to undertake more assurance and risk-based activities and projects. So we've had targeted work on the mobility programme. We have regular assurance conversations with our strategic housing colleagues, recognising they cover a wide breadth of activity. And we're also looking at our city, our river in the moment as well. So we're ensuring that we are appropriately supporting our programme and project colleagues to deliver. All of this activity has resulted in a reduced risk rating for the strategic risk that is within our risk register, which on a negative perspective is ineffective project management governance. Let's see it as an opportunity. I think we're moving it to more effective governance. So that has reduced down from a high risk of 12 to a medium risk of 9. And that obviously was reflected within the previous report. So just to pick up some of the developments that we are moving forward with. So I've talked about risk-based reviews and the project training plan. We are looking at reviewing routine guidance and templates. So the last project manager network, we talked about the project management platform and opportunities for development and how we can strengthen that as a tool, but also the guidance that exists within it. We are responsive to changes in broader guidance. So, for example, the climate change impact assessment, ensuring we're embedding that in the gateway process and challenging at that point as well. And we are looking to do an annual review of activities over the last year to evaluate our impact in line with the development of our annual report, which comes to the committee in the summer. Really happy to take any questions on this report as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Members, any questions on this item? Lucy?
I'm amazed at how this has come on over the last, 3-4 years. It's come from we do projects to this is how we do projects. And I think it seems to be very process driven. And I think in the next report you do on this, to have a sort of schematic that shows us what the different boards are doing and how they interrelate would be very helpful. Now, obviously, I think from what you've said, the hub is a sort of support, individual personal support network. Or have I got that wrong?
The project
management hub.
No, that's the transformation colleagues and also project managers. So it is who are managing our projects. There are some support roles in there as well, but they are managing some of the projects that we do have, so leading transformation activities.
What is the output from the hub? Is it a support network for those individuals, or has it?
sorry, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. It's our project management professionals within the organisation is the hub. The network
So what's the hub doing?
project management. So they are managing our projects and programmes. They are project managers.
So is it a team?
Yes, they are
So
individuals.
it's not meeting as a hub. It's just the team members.
Yes, so it's kind of bringing colleagues together.
Okay, because I didn't. Yeah, bringing them.
That's the network. The network brings colleagues together. The hub, we didn't previously, so we had project personnel in different teams. So it's bringing it together as part of a.
So it's a virtual. It makes disparate members of a team into a virtual team capacity, so they know who everybody else is.
That's the network.
Is it for colleague support or is it for decision making?
The decision making is through our.
This is why I want the graphic.
I will draft you a graphic. It's fine. It's a physical team. So it was previously obviously our Change Derby team. So it's our transformation colleagues and our project managers and project support roles.
And then we've got the transformation board, which also sits in there somewhere. So
yep.
But the end result of this, I hope, is not just more efficient projects being run with a much lower level of risk, but also project managers who are less stressed. And I just wondered whether you've been back and asked them whether they do feel supported and more confident, whether they like the new system they're working within, and if there are mechanisms by which they can feedback their understanding of how it's working to be able to influence its development.
Yeah, so I have attended some management meetings where there are a large concentration of our colleagues delivering projects to ascertain their feedback. We obviously got feedback of project personnel in the broadest sense on the platform through the last project manager network, and I am looking to do some further consultation with colleagues and gathering feedback. We ask for feedback routinely after colleagues have gone through a gateway review to understand the impact of the support that's been provided. I think this isn't, from my perspective, this isn't about a process or a compliance. It's about us working to support through that challenge and high support our projects to be more successful, but there has to be the governance around that, because that's how it's ensured us to do that and enabled us to do that.
Have you gathered information within that as to whether project managers are feeling more supported, whether it's a better environment to be working in, whether they're more likely to stay?
There are many factors that may influence whether a colleague wants to stay within their role.
Obviously,
we have yes. So we will ask those questions through what happens at the end of a gateway review, and as I've said, we are looking at doing a broader survey of engagement and understanding of experience. But I'm very mindful that there are many factors that will influence whether a project manager feels that they are supported, and that's beyond the work that my service or even broader colleagues can provide. So, and it is no doubt that we have, as many organisations, there have been challenges with recruitment that have been previously reflected within the risk registers, and we do have some very complex project and programme activity.
But my hope is that the structures that we're putting in place don't just enable projects to be delivered, but also enable colleagues to enjoy delivering the project.
Yeah.
And if they are enjoying the job, they're more likely to stay. So it's that feedback that's.
I would take that on board. It was something that's a bit part-time.
Yeah. Job satisfaction sort of question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy. Paul.
Sorry, I missed the beginning, but when I looked at this, I thought this is just another way of making sure risks are managed well. Because we have had some project failures or unsatisfactory projects in the past, and it's great that this is being done to assist people who are dealing with a massive issue of the impact of inflation on their project. And I read in the Guardian this morning, but I didn't read the whole article, a lot of levelling up projects are meant to have to be suspended because they actually run out of cash, because inflation over the years has eroded the amount of money that they had, and that must be a big pressure on project managers at the moment, because obviously they have a finite amount of money at the beginning, and that is eroded by all sorts of things. But inflation is something that governs all the prices that are going to be paying out. And I suppose, do they buy in advance?
I mean, obviously, from a delivery perspective, it would depend on the projects, but I can provide the committee with assurance that in most instances that I'm aware of, and I just say most to caveat it, because obviously I'm not everywhere in the organisation, but that is always reflected within the risk registers. You will see it reflected within the commentary as part of our performance monitoring activity, which includes our priority projects, and it's also appropriately reflected within the financial monitoring report as well. So we do know where those high risk areas are.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the questioning that comes from the PMO board as well, probably over the last 12 months, is that ensuring that adequate contingencies are in place when we start a project. Understanding what the inflation is. We're not in normal situations at the moment. So normally a project will probably have 3 to 5% contingencies. You know, we are on certain projects are looking at sort of 15% contingencies that we're expecting. I think that's some of the challenge that goes in through the PMO board to deal with some of those risks. But yeah, it's definitely an issue.
And possibly recruitment if somebody needs to be brought into a team, because there'll be a big demand with a finite number of people that are available.
Capacity is a big capacity to deliver is a big channel of the questioning around the PMO board.
Good, thanks.
Nick, also to come back to your comment, Paul, that this the PMO was set up partly because of recommendations and work done by this committee in the aftermath of the A52. So it was set up to help enable effective project management delivery and to provide an overview of programme activity and outcomes. But it's another fantastic example of the work done by this committee to try and help going forward and make sure that there is more of an overview and that people maybe aren't working in isolated ways. Anything else for Sarah?
I'd just back up what you just said. I think that's in a sense not where it comes from, but obviously it's that was a main driver of a big issue with a big problem, which was eventually sorted and brought in something positive at the end of the day. The positivity, which is what I was getting at earlier on, is what we need to get in there. And I think that's what's happening now. It's kind of a more positive attitude towards things rather than saying, well, what's gone wrong? You know, what can we do better? You know, it's looking at it in a positive way.
Absolutely. It's the what can we do better rather than looking at something.
Has made a difference, I feel. The members of the committee, what they've said and what their issues have been, and when they brought people to account, actually spoken to them.
Yes. And if I'm just allowed to, I suppose, have one final reflection, picking up on those points as well. One of the things we are working on at present with our colleagues from Change Derby and also from broader programmes and projects is strengthening that alignment from a benefit realisation perspective as well. So ensuring, obviously, performance is within my portfolio as well. So making sure that we've got those mechanisms into place to really focus on the positives of delivery and the impact that has for the city and for, you know, in the related projects for us as an organisation. And ultimately, that is the aim of all of this, is to ensure that we are delivering better outcomes in a safe and effective way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. We appreciate your time. Just before we get to one, John, now we're on the agenda for the neighbourhood officers to attend to their update. Do we know when they're
going to come for this one?
That's brilliant. Okay.
What I'll do, Chair, is we'll move in now to go through
That's
the.
fine.
Yeah.
I just wanted to check that it wasn't going to get, that I don't forget about it. So, Richard, item 10, internal audit progress report.
I'm just going to write that very much. As you can see from, if we start on page 4, you can see there how we're progressing with 22-23 audit assignments. I mean, just to let you know, I've brought more progress reports to this committee this year than I have in the past. Normally I try to sort of space it out a bit more, but I'm bringing them to every meeting now, to give you abreast of what's going on. Overall summary so far, just over Q3, you can see that says the 11th of January. So we've done, this reflects 3 quarters work. We're slightly behind target, but then again, we always plan for Q4 to be where we really go for it. So that's where I unleash Hannah and Martin to get their whips out and keep the audit staff moving at a rate of knots. And you can see where everything's pretty much in progress or at least allocated. Still one area that I've got worries about is in the brought forward audits. We've still got the health and safety, but as I've said to committee in the past, a lot of this is down to the fact that the previous audit we did on this, we recommended they got a new health and safety management system, which they bought just before the pandemic struck. So it's taken a lot of time for them to get the system, system was brought in, but they've not had a chance to tweak it because the health and safety team were off doing all the things around the pandemic. So we're looking at other ways of doing this. It's taking a bit more time, but we're looking at other areas we can audit around it while they still put in the system. Then we'll have a look at how the system's working, perhaps in next year's audit. There's a few areas in the plan itself that where we're progressing quite well. Again, getting the buy-in from staff as well, not audit staff, but staff around the, getting them to respond. We have a lot of instances where auditors are held up in audits because they can't get hold of people they need to, or people are too busy to see them. So that's still an issue. The one area I'll flag up as well, grant certifications. We've had to put more staff onto this because of the amount of work we have on this now. In the good old days, internal audit wouldn't have gone anywhere near grant certifications, and external audit would have crawled all over them as part of their work. Well, certainly specific ones, but now there's a lot more onus on internal audit, not on internal audit, on the chief internal auditor to sign off on various things, and that's coming through from central government. So when they introduce a grant, they want the chief internal auditor to put their signature to it. They give assurance that all grant conditions have been adhered to, and it's getting to know what these grants are. Suddenly we'll find that someone will say, oh, there's a grant here that needs signing off, and so we've got next to no time, like 2 days before the deadline, it comes through to us, which we've been trying to build up a register. We've been working with accountancies to get what they know as well, but some of there are still grants that are held elsewhere within the authority that we don't know about until the last minute. So we are trying to build up a register on that, which is working quite well, but we've now got 2 staff that we're having to use on this because of the volume of them. So that could be quite an issue for next year as well, because one of the things is you may or may not know that under the MTMP, etc., and the savings, council's reducing its contribution for CMAP to provide internal audit services. So we will be cutting the number of days that we do, but I'll be talking more about that when I bring the quarter one report. Sorry, the quarter one plan report to the March meeting. That's all I really wanted to say on where we're going with the audits at the moment. We've moved to the next section, and those audits we've covered. The one good thing there is that we've got no limited or no assurances. We've got 2 substantial and 4 reasonable. So it's from what work we're doing, things are looking quite well. We will be bringing you a surprise to the March meeting. We have a draft report out at the moment that's got no assurance, so we've kept that one from you, but that will be March's intriguing one. Unfortunately, it's on an area you're all aware of, where we've done a briefing to you in the past around catering. So again, one of the audits here, the declaration of interests around staff and members has got a risk accepted. We don't normally have that many risk accepted, but suddenly we've our buses, 2 have come along at the same, within a few months of each other. So that's on there in 4.3 of the covering report. Basically, what we're saying there is that best practice is said there should be some sort of mechanism for staff to report through to management if they see a declaration of interest on a colleague, etc. So we were recommending a form to do this. The management have come back and said, could we not use whistleblowing? And I see a problem with that. And it links in nicely with what that chats were earlier on. So basically, yeah, it could, as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy with the risk accepted, because if I'm going to use the whistleblowing. And I must admit, declarations of interest have cropped up from time to time in whistleblowing in the past. So it does. And I would recommend to the committee that they accept that this is a risk accepted one and move on with that. But I can then just with my involvement in whistleblowing anyway, I can keep the committee informed as to whether it is actually working or not. What I would like to do, though, on these is just draw attention to a couple of the issues here that you'll have heard from Andy Bramwell in the past about various issues. The payroll fraud, advice on process. This was an external fraud that was successful. Should never have happened. Proper procedure had been followed. It wouldn't have happened because any member of staff that wants to change any details can do so through the self-service function within My People. This was an attempt using a member of staff whose name they'd picked up from, because that name is in the public domain, put in a request to change bank account details, and for some unknown reason it didn't go through the proper process and a form was sent out to them. It was queried a few times. They changed email addresses. Basically, as Andy Bramwell would tell you, there were red flags all over it. You could tell from just reading the emails that were coming in, this wasn't kosher. There was things like, when is payday? You know, this is urgent, that type of stuff. A member of staff would know what payday was, and they'd know. Fortunately, it got one salary got paid. They tried it on another member of staff, but that member of staff was actually an agency worker, so it wasn't on payroll, so that one failed. But again, I've worked with payroll to make sure that they've actually strengthened their processes in there. So I'm happy with what they've done on that. It shouldn't happen again. And the other one is around the iPad investigation. Again, this is one where an iPad, an old iPad, shouldn't still be in circulation. It's one of our establishments, somehow went home with a child. The mum picked it up thinking it was their iPad, somehow managed to get into the iPad through the password and access photographs of and information about children, etc. on there. So again, this is something Andy's always saying, why are people purchasing stuff outside of, everything should be purchased through IT and supported by IT. This was neither purchased by IT or supported by IT. So again, it's issues that the committee have been made aware of in the past, and they're still happening. Moving down to the recommendations, got significant recommendations. I just pick up the bus station and bereavement services audits. This is something that Chair and Vice Chair raised at our briefing, that could we have a more up-to-date picture? It's okay me saying to you, yeah, they've been to you, this is still ongoing. What I'm going to try and do for the March one is to give you an update from Brian for the bus station and from Doug Walkman for the bereavement services audits. Neighbourhood boards is one of the ones that you've called in anyway, that we'll be dealing with in a second. Other than that, there's not much to raise on the recommendations. We're still following them up, still chasing things. We've got a regular process where we'll write out to all service directors on a quarterly basis and say, these are all the recommendations that are outstanding in your area. Please can you get back to us, with how you're implementing those. And once we've done that, we'll then send out a summary to the strategic directors so they can actually see what's happening in there. Then the other thing on there is the quality assurance and improvement plan. This is just really keep you updated. We will be taking a new QAIP to the next CMAP board, which is in March, which the chair will be invited to. This is an update position. As you can see, we're not doing too bad with these. We've completed a lot of areas, so I'm pleased with how things are going on that. But if you want to ask questions around this now before we bring in neighbourhood boards, that would be helpful, Chair.
Yeah, I think so. Members, any questions? Lucy.
Thank you. Can I start with the grant certification, which you mentioned?
Yes.
Is this just looking at grants that the council is applying for, or is it also grants that other people are applying for, but the council is the sign-off body?
In the main, I'm not aware of any people we get dragged into are the ones where it's monies to the council that we have to we have to look at others to make sure that our conditions have been.
That's fine,
to-
because it's the reverse side of that, where I flagged up on now that I think it was, I have to go back to my emails or something. I think it was building services that were supposed to be being signing off. Might have been housing services who were signing off grants for having insulation houses. And
we do sometimes look at those and yeah.
yeah, and they were signing them off without data to be able to sign them off. But
Yeah, where those come through to us, Councillor Care, we will look at, you know, what information's there. We seek evidence from them.
I don't think that you were part of the sign-off route, but I think somebody else was doing it, but they may or not been doing it in a sufficiently critical eye. In 4.3 in the main report, we're talking about the risk thing and conflicts of interest. Is there any training on conflicts of interest? It's on page 4.3. Yes.
You're talking.
It relates back to page 10 on your report as well.
It does. Are you referring here, Councillor Care, to staff or to members or both?
Particularly staff, I think it was this one.
I'm not aware of any, to be honest.
Because if people aren't being trained, then they're just going back to their conditions of employment, which they probably haven't read since they accepted the job. So I think we need to, if that's going to be meaningful, people need flagged up as something they think about. Otherwise, they won't be raising it.
I think that's something that we ought to get, the authority needs to do. I mean, there's the Weekly in Touch, you can do that through there to remind staff.
Does everybody read that? I think it needs to go to a training. It's just a one-liner into some sort of training at some point that people are expected to do at a reasonable frequency of at least every 2 years.
I'm just trying to think how best to deliver that. I mean, there is mandatory training, but it's how we slip that one into the training that's out there.
I'll leave that with you.
Yeah, I'll talk with the relevant officers and we'll try and work out how we best can. I can't see a good solution at the moment.
No, I can't, because I mean, for us, we get a reminder every year.
Yeah.
We have forms to fill in, but replicating that across the whole of the authority would be a tremendous.
You don't need that much, but just sufficient. The dashboard, I'm sure it's not just my laptop that doesn't do a very nice rendition of the dashboard, and it's really difficult to read the captions. Just my computer.
It's not, no. I'm not sure sometimes if it's when these are PDF'd, whether it does that. I'll have a look at it. I'll have a chat with Dom and we'll see if we can make it a bit clearer, because it does the sort of at the bottom of the tables on the axis, it is quite blurred, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, it looks fine on my Word documents. I'm just wondering, we'd have to have a look at how we can.
It was the same with some of Sarah's, the graphics on some of Sarah's reports. As clear as they could be.
Although the iPad looks really clear, I'm just looking over your shoulder and yours looks a lot clearer than mine. So we just have it sorted.
Didn't provide that iPad.
And his experience.
High resolution of the country.
On home care on page 8 of the report, there is a comment about inefficient invoicing. And I just wondered whether this was something about the way in which we're resolving that it's going to be translatable into other areas, and whether that up as a cross deep.
The things we do look at, Councillor Care, is where we can take best practice from and push it out. We're looking at different ways of how we promote.
Otherwise, it might be something to talk to Linda about or maybe her new system is going to make it super duper easy. Under the community safety item, next one down, again, it's a training thing. There's a question there about how the council has adequate training and guidance in place to ensure officers recognise report indicators of modern slavery. But all the summary weaknesses seem to highlight that actually we're not doing training very well.
That's why there are.
And there are all no risks, but but is it actually a low risk when we actually seem to have nobody doing any training about what to look for?
It's an interest. It's how we define risk. It's a low risk. I suppose when we're looking at risk, we're looking at as it within the context of the whole council.
Okay.
So yeah. So it's.
But in terms of meeting our responsibilities to recognise and report modern slavery, if we're not doing anything, we're failing on that national target.
There has been certain things done with this. Okay. Yeah, and it is getting better, to be honest.
I'm just comparing that with the what Derby Homes are doing on slavery, where they've embedded it into a conversation with contractors, with their frontline staff, and so on. And there it's happening. But here it seems to be 5 things are flagging up that it's not happening.
What's starting to be done? Okay. So it's in process.
And on page 15, we start off with a thing that says that this isn't happening very well because of COVID. Are we really still impacted on recommendations done because of COVID?
A lot of people have forgotten about them. They were issued around them, and since COVID's come about, people have keep forgetting about them.
Is it because of COVID or because they're not doing it?
It's not strictly no, and it's something that we will remove that from future reports. But there's still a legacy from it, if you see what I mean.
And then we have these, what's listed as 4 recommendations notified previously are bus station, bereavement services, neighbourhood boards, and local.
2 from bus station.
Oh, it counts as 2 from bus station.
Yeah, it says 2 significant recommendations.
But in terms of the bereavement services, haven't we still got risk, even though the upgrades to the Victoria are off the forward plan?
Potentially, yes. I mean, the thing was.
So how do we deal with that when it's not even on the forward plan?
One of the things that the chair and vice chair have asked for is an update from to come through to the next meeting as well. So rather than just need to keep saying what officers are saying, getting asked them to explain a bit more as to what the ramifications are, and not. At the moment, it's been put to one side again because of savings issues. So setting that. I do know that the commercialism team have picked up on it as well, and it's gone through various things. But again, it's sort of stalled.
But it's now off the forward plan.
Yeah.
So it's not stalled, it's stopped. And finally, when you come back with more talk about how the relations are, can we have some graphs?
To be fair, you can't see in the dashboard at the front's got some graphs on the recommendations.
But they're not there enough for Lucy.
I want something to see how it's getting worse, or it's improving. It just seems to be getting worse.
Not just bottom left obviously gives you 3 months, 6 months every year.
But that's not. I think we need. I'd like a line graph. Do you see the description? 2 years.
I'm sure we can come up with somebody Robbie line.
Anything else from you, Lucy?
No, that's my list. Thank you very much.
Super. Would it be pertinent to just pause other questions for Richard to take the neighbourhood boards item so that Sarah can then go about her day, because she's been delayed enough by me moaning about the car park?
Chair, do you want a quick reminder of what the issue was?
Yeah.
Just so you, this was a significant issue concerning the absence of a clear record of all decisions being made by members outside the normal neighbourhood boards and ward committee meeting cycle. And I think as well, there was, I think Councillor Kelly got a couple of other issues she wanted to raise around neighbourhood boards as well, that she raised at the October meeting.
So there were a number of recommendations was picked up. So firstly, to deal with that one. So now what happens, and I think it generally came up when we had that time of COVID. So we weren't having a lot of face-to-face meetings, online meetings taken place, or quick decisions being made. So now what happens is that whatever decision, whether it's by email, it has to be a random, quick one, or if it's at an official ward committee, it's recorded as a ward committee minute and loaded as a record of the decision making. So that's there for that and shared and then that's confirmed with members at the following meeting in terms of that. There were other changes that were made in terms of the recommendation. So on the application form and the guidance we issue to applicants, that's a lot clearer now and includes the process that takes place. So previously it was a case of here's your application form and the guidance on how to complete it. There's now information on there, the process it takes, which is it's very clear that a neighbourhood board, if there is one in the ward, is only recommending a decision. It's down to the final decision of the ward committee, and the ward committee is what matters, not necessarily the neighbourhood board. Neighbourhood board only just makes a recommendation in terms of funding. There was also the recommendation that it could be viewed around if the neighbourhood manager or an officer is giving advice around applications, that's not seen, that their influence and all the advice they give then discourages the applicant from submitting an application form. So now we have a system where we try and detach ourselves from that process and ask that people request application forms directly from our generic neighbourhoods inbox for them to be sent out. Any applications we do receive have to go through that neighbourhoods inbox, so it's logged and recorded. And on there we record all any decision making. So, for example, if an applicant applies and is unsuccessful, we didn't necessarily record that in previously on ward committee minutes. We'd only put the successful ones on now. Now we include if they've not been successful. And then, yes, sorry, the last one, it was in terms of the ward committee minutes. We are a bit behind in terms of putting them on CMIS and looking at a more formal system for that, but they are being uploaded on CMIS so people can see the record of all the decisions from 2019 October of that year, from when the neighbourhood boards budgets were reintroduced.
Thank you, Sarah. Members, any questions? Any other items to raise with Sarah? Lucy?
I'm not sure if this is one of the things that Richard thought I was going to ask, but in terms of statutory decision making, my understanding is that we have to now meet in purpose to make decisions like we are doing today. And I think that is not something that's currently happening in certainly all ward committees. So, and that's national regulation, as I understand it. So is there going to be changes to that? And if so, when and how?
Got me in that one. I think one of the things is that we've always tried to maintain that flexibility with it, because, as I say, not each ward has a neighbourhood board. So a lot of times things will go through ward committees, just the ward committees. I think we'll take that one away, and then I think that's something for us to look at. But I do understand we're also looking at generally the constitutional arrangements around neighbourhood boards, ward committees, and the funding generally to look at potential change, and whether to see whether we can accommodate it within that.
So I don't know if Dom, you've got anything you want to add to that?
The only thing I've got to add is Charles said it's been looked at as part of the constitutional review, so we should have something more on that in March.
Okay, thank you.
You happy with that, Lucy?
It means we're continuing to be non-compliant with national legislation, but there's a process in place to take it forward. Richard, what was the other thing I was supposed to be talking about?
I know you were disappointed when Alex said the meeting in November, because you said, oh, I could have asked him that question on neighbourhood boards, and he's not here now. So whether that was the same one, I don't know.
Okay, I don't know.
If you think of it, Lucy, let us know. Anything else for Sarah? No? Thank you. Oh.
Can I just say, I think from what Sarah said, there's one or two issues here, though. I think we can perhaps close off. So what I'll do is I'll get Gary, who's the auditor, out to contact you and talk to you, and we'll get things.
That's okay.
So we might be able to move most of these off there.
Yeah, and then what I can do as a follow-up is do a bit of a written thing for the committee.
Yes.
And for Gary, so that you've got something for the next meeting. Charles comes and constitutional arrangements.
Super. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for attending. I know it was a bit of a late request for you, but we really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
So back to any other questions for Richard on internal audit progress report.
Just a general query, really, rather specific on those things. If something pops up elsewhere in terms of frauds issue and things, how do you then translate that into issues that to check here? For instance, there's been a recent fraud in Birmingham on highway contractors. An employee's been jailed for a number of years because he was siphoning off money into various unlocked. And there was also a councillor actually convicted of fraud over COVID-19 applications related to some pizza restaurant. Suggesting any of these things happen here, but you know, they may do. I don't know. I mean, you don't. Well, none of us know really. But how do you translate that into your forward plan, or what happens here, for instance?
The three of us sit down. We do quite a bit of horizon scanning, and we do things like anything that comes up in public finance or anything like that around who's been jailed or who's committed this fraud. We then say, can that happen here? And so we'll weave that into audits, and if not, we'll put it into. We might have a specific look at various things. So Q1 plan that comes to you, we'll be picking up on those type of things. Also, if you've probably noticed from here, we've been doing some work around the management of fraud and the counter fraud framework. That was really came about following committee's decision that I should be well away from writing policies on fraud, because how then can I then come to you and give you assurance on the counter fraud framework when I'm writing the policies, because of course I'm going to say the policies are fantastic. But so we're doing a lot of work around that now, just to see one of the things we have got changed, and I know Sarah's not here now, but we noticed that there wasn't any strategic risk around fraud. So that's now been brought, the fraud has been brought onto strategic risk register. Although again, they come to me for information. I know they also go to others like Emily Feen, and I'm not sure if Alison gets pulled into that, but certainly some of the accountancy staff around financial procedures and that type of stuff. So we've got now, at least we've now got a risk being notified on strategic risk around fraud. But we're also looking at, you know, how is counter fraud framework set up here? We've got a counter fraud team, but they look at specifics. We've got internal audit. Again, we get called into things, but who actually is overseeing all of that? And that's the big issue. And I know when committee raised that, Simon said that, well, I think that's me then. But what we're looking at now is, you know, is that working in practice? If it does work, how is it actually working? Has Simon delegated it down to anybody, or is it still sat with Simon? And I think different people have got different views of how it all works.
I mean, that was really what I was getting at, because who's an overall looking at these things? And
yeah,
you know, public finances, obviously, if you remember, you get these weekly updates of things and issues that have cropped up, and they tell you about frauds and various issues that have cropped up. Because these are things that I pick up, because obviously I'm a member, as a lot of people here will be members, you know. So it's an issue of just feeding it into the process wherever that process is fed.
Yeah.
Whoever picks it up, rather than fall down the gap between counter fraud, internal audit, or anybody else.
Yeah, we're always scouring. I mean, the idea is that we've got this business partnering approach now. So Hannah and Martin attend DMT, so they can see what's going on there. They can raise issues there with peoples and committees in place if there are fraud areas that they then say, well, this is an area, what are you doing around this? So we've got all that, and we do a lot of talking to other audit sections as well, and other audit partnerships that they know around, and so there's quite a good network that works in the background that we can plug into, pick out these issues.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this item? No, then we will go to the highlight of the meeting. Richard, the self-assessment of effectiveness.
Thank you very much. That's that annual time when we get to a self-assessment, and need to make sure that, you know, committee understand, you know, what their role is. And then what we can do is we can evaluate this. As you can see from the report, one of the things is that it's time for looking at basically where you think your understanding of how the committee is working, is it meeting its objectives, etc. There's a new guidance come out from SIPFA back in 2022. They've updated their guidance to audit committees. What they're more pushing there, of course, is the introduction of the independent member, or co-opted member, as they like to call it. So we're already ahead of the game now. We've got co-opted members already, but I mean, not as many as some authorities. Some authorities like Barnsley, I think, have got 4 or 5 co-opted members. Other areas they've got co-opted members as chair of committee. So it varies, but we're ahead of the game on that one. So one of the key issues that we need to do is how effective is the audit committee. And so each year we do this self-assessment exercise that hopefully everyone join in with. And this year CIPFA have actually reassessed their document that we've used in the past few years, and now made it even more interactive. And I've tested it out this morning here as well. So if you're on the actual self-assessment form, if you click on one of the boxes, it actually puts a tick in for you, which is it's a major upgrade really from what we had in the previous years. So what I'm suggesting is that again, I've set a date in the report for you to get back to me. But if everyone could just fill this out to the best of their ability. I mean, you've all got different skills and knowledge of audit committees. Got some people have got returning chairs and things like that. Some people have been on the audit committee for several years. Others are new to it. So it's going to be understanding that. I will refer you back to the audit and governance terms of reference as well. If anyone wants, they are in the Constitution. But that's really, are you meeting those terms of reference? That's the key thing. And these questions will help you understand that, as well as, make you challenge what this committee does. But if you could fill that out and put all the ticks and boxes, then save it and email it through to me. And if, at some stage I will have a quick chat with the chair and get it to chase people up. We've done actually that in the past. Unfortunately, on that occasion, the previous chair was the one he needed to chase himself up on, really. So we won't mention him.
No, we won't mention him. But yeah, just to reiterate what Richard said, there's no right or wrong answers to fill this in, and don't think if you've not been on the committee for more than a few months that you're not able to fill this in. It's just to give Richard and us a good idea of what's going right and what could be improved. And I think it's led in on previous years, it's led into some of the training that officers have delivered to the committee, just to make sure that the committee are getting all the assurances that they need and are understanding all the assurances that they need to provide, the good governance that we give to full council and to the city. So yeah, just to fill it in. And you said by the 27th of February, was that right? Yes, it is by the 27th of February, but it is dead easy. It's just tick box, literal tick box, because it does it for you. You'll probably then have to save it and email it to email it to Richard, but that shouldn't be too onerous. For any problems, just shout Richard. Any questions on that?
I did have a quick go at it the other day, and I put the ticks. How does it then translate down to the sub score and the totals? Because I could tick the boxes, but I couldn't take it any further than that.
I think you actually have to then count a number of ticks and put that scores in at the bottom. Because what they've done is they've given you little numbers as well. So I think my understanding of how they want it used is the weighting of the answers there. So like no further improvement is a 5. But just send them through. Don't worry about the scores. I'll sort all that out.
So you get 5 in number 5. That's 25 points.
I mean, the maximum possible score is 200 apparently. So.
I don't know how you get.
No.
It should be 40 questions at 5 points each.
Yeah, I was going to say the maths don't seem to add up there.
That's why people like Alison and I pay our subs to CIPFA, so give them even more money to come up with these fangled things that they've got no idea how it comes out as the answer. But yeah, 200 is sort of. I'm just wondering what the stars are for at the end.
That means
40 questions, sub questions multiplied by 5. So there you go. So I think it's all the bullet points as well count as questions. So they've got 40 there.
But yeah, just absolutely just best shot and send it over to Richard so that he's got a good idea of where we go. for the future. Anything? Oh,
Just, should we be doing this at an earlier stage of the after the committee's been formed so that you can get a better picture as a collective about what the kind of strengths and weaknesses or opportunities for development are?
Possibly on, because I think a lot of the questions in this one relate to the past year.
yeah, I think, and I can't remember what time of year we've done it previously.
We've always done it around this time. So we've had at least 4 or 5 committees, so everyone's had a chance to understand what the work of the committee is, even new members, and so they can see, so they've got some idea. Do it too early in the year, a lot of the any new members would go, well, I don't really understand what the committee's doing, so I can't answer the questions. Well, I haven't seen this yet. Let me go ask. It's coming later in the year.
Yeah.
And if it is, I mean, I looked at, I've got a hard copy. I didn't realise it was interactive. Makes it a lot easier for me getting it to you. But I hadn't appreciated that it was a retrospective thing because I just printed it off and was going to do it later. So, I mean, on that basis, it seems to be a good point to put it down because people have experienced the committee and hopefully got more confident if they're being drafted in as we are, you know, to a committee that can be quite daunting. Yeah.
Super. So you'll have all the forms back by the 27th of February, Richard.
So I give you nothing to do, then you don't have to chase anybody.
Sounds good. So item 12 is exclusion of the press and public. To consider a resolution to exclude the press and public during consideration of the following items, that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following items on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information.